People at the Denver airport thought it was just another quiet winter morning until a 45-year-old man in a worn brown leather jacket and his German shepherd suddenly froze in their tracks. Hunter, usually calm, as Stone erupted into frantic barking at a pregnant woman drifting through the crowd. Passengers gasped. Security drew closer. But Ethan Grayson saw something different in his partner's eyes. Fear. A desperate warning. Hunter wasn't trying to attack her. He was trying to save her. Moments later, the truth hidden beneath her swollen belly would send shockwaves through the entire terminal and drag Ethan back into a world he thought he'd left behind. Because what Hunter smelled wasn't life. It was a ticking nightmare. If this story touches you, please help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. Your click really means more than you think. God bless you for keeping hope alive. The morning at Denver International Airport unfolded beneath a cold Colorado sun, its pale winter light spilling through the high glass panels and casting shimmering reflections across the thin layer of snow outside the entrance. Inside, the air buzzed with the familiar rhythm of rolling suitcases, scattered conversations, and the metallic hum of security belts. Yet moving through that sea of strangers was a man who looked as if he carried an entire winter inside him. Ethan Grayson, 45 years old, 6 feet tall, and built like someone who once trained his body to endure storms, but had slowly let its edges soften through years of quiet exile, walked with the posture of someone who had grown accustomed to silence. His frame was lean, almost wiry, the muscles still present, but worn thin by time, and the solitude he chose after his life had come apart. His face was sharply angled, with a jawline that could have belonged to a younger man, had it not been softened by a patchy, untrimmed beard. Dark brown hair, slightly long, and brushing against the back of his neck, hid streaks of silver near his temples. But it was his eyes, gray, cold, and deep, that told the truth, a man haunted by something he still refused to name. He wore what he always wore, a thick, dark brown leather jacket, creased with age, a red and navy flannel beneath it, faded jeans, old winter boots, and a gray wool scarf wrapped around his neck. The outfit made him look like a man who stepped out of a past he couldn't let go of. But the one thing that tethered him to the present walked close at his side, a German shepherd named Hunter. Hunter was 5 years old, large, broad-shouldered, and moved with a confident grace that made passers-by instinctively step out of his path. His coat was black and tanned thick, like the fur of a northern wolf, and his amber-brown eyes carried the intuition of a creature who sensed things humans often missed. Calm, composed, and deeply loyal, Hunter was the anchor that kept Ethan from drifting too far into the shadows of his mind. Ethan was no longer with law enforcement. Not since the incident, a word he hated, because it was too small for what he had lost. Years ago, during a K-9 operation gone wrong, Ethan had made a decision that cost a young officer his life. The guilt carved itself into his bones, driving him out of the K-9 unit and into a secluded existence. Now he worked as a part-time consultant for airport security, mostly training rookie handlers and their dogs. It wasn't much, but it was something that still gave him a reason to wake up. This morning was supposed to be routine. Quiet, predictable, something his battered mind depended on. But fate rarely respected a man's need for stillness. Hunter's paws halted mid-step, claws clicking sharply on the polished floor, his head-lifted ears snapping upright with acute precision. His nostrils twitched once-twice, like he had caught the scent of something distant yet dangerous. Ethan slowed. "Hunter, what is it? Buddy?" His voice was rough, carrying the gravel of too many sleepless nights. Hunter did not give the usual side glance or playful flick of his ear that said he had simply caught a whiff of an unattended sandwich. Instead, a low, tense rumble vibrated from deep within his chest, a growl so soft only Ethan could hear it, but sharp enough to slice through the noise of the crowd inside Ethan's mind. Before Ethan could follow Hunter's gaze, the crowd parted just enough for him to see her. A young woman, late 20s, tall but slightly hunched as though trying to make herself smaller, walked toward the security line with her arms wrapped protectively around a large, pregnant belly. Her name, Ethan would later learn, was Molly Grant. She had long, pale blonde hair that fell over her shoulders like a winter shawl, her skin almost translucent beneath the cold lights, and her steps slow, uneven, like each movement required careful calculation. Molly avoided every eye that glanced her way, her face locked in an expression that hid fear and exhaustion behind a strained smile. Hunter suddenly erupted. The bark that tore from his throat was so sharp, so sudden, that it cracked through the terminal like a gunshot. People jolted, startled cries rippling across the crowd. Ethan instinctively tightened his grip on the leash, but Hunter lunged forward with such raw urgency that Ethan's arm strained painfully. Hunter heel Ethan barked back, his voice cutting through the panic, but Hunter didn't listen. Not even a flicker of obedience. Instead, he dragged Ethan several steps across the floor, nails scraping muscles coiled like a creature possessed. Molly froze. Her eyes widened, her face draining of color as she stumbled backward. "Please, don't let him come near me," she cried out, one hand trembling against her rounded stomach. Around them, security officers and startled bystanders began reacting, pulling children close, stepping back, raising phones. But Ethan felt something else entirely. Hunter's heartbeat pulsing through the leash like a frantic message. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't attack. It wasn't instinctive policing behavior. It was desperation. Hunter wasn't trying to frighten Molly. He was trying to warn her. "Hunter, stop," Ethan hissed, but the dog surged forward another step, barking so fiercely the floor seemed to vibrate beneath them. Ethan's chest tightened. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Hunter's entire body strained toward Molly, his eyes locked onto her stomach with laser precision, as if he could see something buried beneath her skin. Molly's breathing turned ragged. She leaned against a railing, clutching her belly like shielding it from an unseen danger. And then Hunter lunged one final time, letting out a bark so piercing, so primal, that every conversation within 50 feet evaporated into stunned silence. The terminal froze. Ethan stared at his partner, the dog who never disobeyed, never panicked, never lost control. His gray eyes widened, his breath catching. "Hunter," he whispered, voice trembling with a fear he couldn't yet explain. "What did you just smell?" And for a moment, just one suspended heartbeat, Ethan felt the world around him tilt, as if the truth Hunter sensed was about to tear open everything Ethan thought he knew. The emergency screening room at Denver International Airport sat under harsh fluorescent lights that hummed with a cold, sterile rhythm, as if the walls themselves anticipated something going wrong. Outside the glass observation panel, Ethan Grayson stood rigid, feeling the brittle winter air still clinging to his jacket, as though it had followed him inside. Hunter pressed against his leg, trembling lightly, his amber eyes locked on the woman being guided into the room. Ethan tried to steady his own breathing, but every instinct he had fought to bury over the years now clawed its way to the surface, raw and undeniable. Molly Grant sat weakly in the metal chair, her breath short and shallow. Up close, under bright lighting, her appearance looked even more fragile. Her blonde hair clung to her temples, damp with sweat. Her face, round yet drawn with exhaustion, held a pallor that scared Ethan more than her earlier panic. Her wide blue eyes flicked around the room like a trapped animal's landing briefly on the medical personnel, but never long enough to trust them. She seemed young, too young, to be bracing herself like someone who had lived with fear for far longer than her age should allow. Two medical staff members moved around her with nervous precision. The first was Dr. Karen Mitchell, a woman in her mid-40s with shoulder-length auburn hair tucked neatly into a low ponytail. She possessed a sharp, intelligent face, high cheekbones, narrow nose, and eyes that held a steady confidence built from years of crisis situations. Dr. Mitchell had the presence of someone who carried the weight of responsibility daily, yet never cracked beneath it. Ethan recognized that strength, instantly envying how unwavering she appeared. Beside her was Nurse Samuel Price, a man around 50, with a square jaw softened by a graying beard. His eyes were warm brown, the kind that could calm even the most anxious patient. His broad shoulders and gentle movements suggested someone who once worked in a more physically demanding profession. Fire service, perhaps, but had found a second life in caring for others. He radiated patience, the kind only people who had seen true tragedy often carried. Dr. Mitchell knelt beside Molly. "We're going to check your vitals, all right? Just breathe slowly." But the doctor glanced once toward Ethan and Hunter, outside a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. She had noticed the dog's reaction, too. Hunter's throat rumbled again, a low, mournful sound. Ethan crouched beside him, whispering, "I know. I feel it, too." His words were barely audible even to himself. It had been years since he let his instincts speak louder than his doubt. But Hunter's body language was unmistakable. The dog wasn't reacting to fear, nor aggression, nor a simple scent of illness. This was something deeper danger, imminent and unseen. Nurse Price lifted the edge of Molly's shirt slightly to examine her abdomen. Ethan's breath tightened when he saw it. Even through the glass, he could see how unnaturally firm her stomach seemed, stretched tight like overinflated rubber instead of the gentle curve of a real pregnancy. A small frown tugged at Dr. Mitchell's mouth. She pressed her fingers gently against Molly's abdomen. Instead of yielding under her touch, the surface emitted a faint but undeniable clink, a metallic resonance that didn't belong in a human body. Her eyes widened. "That's not normal." Molly flinched violently, tears spilling down her cheeks. Don't press on it, please. It hurts." Dr. Mitchell raised her hands in a soothing motion. "It's all right. We won't touch it again. Just tell me, has this happened before?" Molly's lips trembled. She shook her head, then nodded, then shook it again, unable to decide which truth she could afford to release. Ethan felt a deep ache in his chest. Her fear wasn't just panic. It was the fear of someone carrying a secret that could kill her. Nurse Price checked the heart monitor clipped to Molly's finger. "Her pulse is jumping too fast," he said quietly, brows furrowing. "This isn't just anxiety." Dr. Mitchell's voice dipped low as she leaned closer to Molly. "I need you to tell me exactly how far along you are." But Molly's breaths came in short, frantic bursts. "It's not." She stopped clutching her stomach. I can't. It's wrong." A sob broke from her throat, raw and terrified. "Please, please, something's happening." Suddenly, Molly gasped in agony, bending forward as if stabbed from the inside. Hunter barked sharply, his body slamming against the glass with a desperate thud. His nails scraped violently across the floor. Ethan grabbed his harness, feeling the dog's whole body trembling, fear, frustration, warning all mixing into one. "Molly, stay with me," Dr. Mitchell urged, as she tried to steady the woman's shoulders. "What's wrong? What do you feel?" Molly's voice cracked into a scream, her eyes wide and glassy. "It's leaking! Oh God, it's leaking! Don't let it explode!" Dr. Mitchell froze. Nurse Price's face drained of color. Ethan felt his pulse slam painfully against his ribs. "Leaking! Explode!" The words echoed through Ethan's skull like bullets. He pressed closer to the glass, unable to tear his gaze away. The doctor mouthed something too quiet to hear, but Ethan read it perfectly. "This is bad." Inside the room, Molly's body trembled uncontrollably. Sweat streamed down her face. She clawed at the air as if trying to pull the invisible danger away from her own skin. Ethan's heart pounded harder than it had in years. For the first time since he left the K-9 unit, instinct overtook fear. He reached for the door handle. Hunter whimpered an agonized sound Ethan had never heard from him before. Ethan looked through the glass one last time, meeting Molly's eyes as she screamed, forcing out a broken plea that shattered him. "Don't let me die. It's going to burst, please." Hunter barked again, a single sharp blast that silenced every other sound. And Ethan knew without one shred of doubt that whatever was inside her belly wasn't a child. It was a ticking nightmare waiting to detonate. The surgical prep room was cold enough that the stainless steel counters glimmered under the harsh lights, like frozen sheets of winter ice. And as the door swung shut behind Ethan Grayson, he felt an invisible weight settle on his chest. Something heavier than the temperature. Something ancient. Fear, guilt, memory. Hunter stayed pressed against his leg, his body trembling in shallow ripples, his amber eyes fixed on Molly Grant as she lay on the elevated operating table. The young woman looked impossibly small beneath the sprawling machinery around her, swallowed by a white gown 2 sizes too large, her blonde hair plastered to her forehead in sweat-soaked strands. Her breathing hitched in uneven bursts, each one sounding more fragile than the last. Ethan stood at her side, unable to peel his gaze away from the terror etched across her face. He felt that same old helplessness creeping up his spine, the same helplessness he'd felt years ago on a different night, in a different crisis when his partner had died in his arms. The guilt he thought he had buried returned like a phantom pressing fingers into his ribs. Dr. Karen Mitchell moved briskly around the table, adjusting monitors and preparing equipment. Her auburn hair was tucked behind her ears, and her normally composed expression carried a rare crack of worry. She ran her fingers gently over Molly's pulse point. "Her heart rate is unstable. If the chemical leak worsens, she won't last long." Near the foot of the table stood Dr. Alan Reeves, the on-call surgeon. He was a man in his early 50s, tall and lean, with a gaunt face, sharpened by years of emergency medicine. His neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard gave him an austere, almost monastic look, and deep lines carved along his brow made him seem perpetually solemn. He carried the aura of a man who had seen too many close calls and lost too many battles, and it showed in the quiet deliberation of his movements. "We need to operate immediately," he said, voice low but resolute. "Whatever device is inside her is breaking down." Molly's fingers twitched. She opened her eyes halfway, pupils sluggish, her blue irises cloudy with pain. She turned her gaze toward Ethan. Not the doctors, not the nurses, but Ethan, the stranger she had seen only moments ago in a chaotic terminal. Something about him, his tired gray eyes, or the way he stood like a shield between her and the world, made him feel safer than the sterile room surrounding her. Her voice cracked like thin glass. "Please, don't leave." Ethan swallowed hard. His throat felt raw, as if he had swallowed winter wind. He moved closer, resting a hand gently on the side of the table, so she knew he wasn't going anywhere. "I'm here," he murmured, though his voice trembled in a way that embarrassed him. Hunter whimpered, inching forward until his chin brushed the metal frame. Even Dr. Reeves paused for a moment, struck by the dog's raw empathy. Ethan's heart clenched at the sight. Hunter had always sensed fear, illness, danger. But this was different. The dog's ears were pinned back, not in aggression, but grief, as though he knew that Molly's life dangled by a thread so thin it could snap beneath the weight of one wrong breath. Molly's eyes flickered to Hunter. He knew, she whispered. A tear slipped down her temple. "From the moment he saw me, he knew what was inside me could kill me." Ethan inhaled sharply. He had trained dozens of canines in his lifetime, but none had ever reacted like Hunter had in that terminal, wild, frantic, desperate. It wasn't detection. It was prophecy. Molly sucked in a sharp breath, her face contorting. "They forced me," she choked out. "I didn't want to do it. I swear I didn't." Ethan leaned closer, his voice soft but urgent. "Tell me, Molly. Tell us what happened." Dr. Mitchell nodded encouragingly. "Anything you share could save your life." Molly blinked hard, trying to keep consciousness. They found me 6 months ago. I had no money, no help." "My son." Her voice broke, then returned as a trembling whisper. "Lucas. He's 6. They said they'd take him if I didn't cooperate." Ethan felt his stomach twist. The name, the age something in him cracked. He saw another child, another life he'd once failed because of a decision he regretted every day since. Molly continued, her breaths shallow. "They told me it was harmless medicine. Just transport it. Wear the fake pregnancy. Walk through security. Hand it off at the gate." Her throat tightened. "But I overheard them. It wasn't medicine. It was liquid narcotics. High concentration. If the casing broke, it would. Her body trembled violently, and she cried out, gripping the sides of the table. Nurse Price hurried to stabilize her IV. "Stay with us, Molly." But Molly's gaze locked on Ethan again, her pupils wide with terror. "I didn't know. It could kill me. I didn't know." Ethan's vision blurred. His gray eyes burned, but he didn't look away. He couldn't. "We're going to help you," he said, though he didn't know if it was true. It was all he had left to give. Molly's breathing hitched. Her hand reached out a trembling, desperate motion, and without thinking, Ethan caught it in his own. Her fingers were ice cold. Her final whisper cut straight through him. He knew. "Your dog." He knew I was dying. Hunter pressed his forehead against the metal rail, letting out a soft, broken whine, as if acknowledging her words. Dr. Reeves signaled to the team. "She's crashing. We need to begin now." Dr. Mitchell stepped forward. "Ethan, you should step back. We're about to take her in." But Molly tightened her grip on Ethan's hand with surprising strength. "Please, don't let me die." Ethan's vision swam. Something painful, old, and buried twisted through him, a memory of another hand slipping out of his grasp years ago, another life he couldn't save. He squeezed Molly's hand back. "You're not alone," he said hoarsely. "Not this time." Molly exhaled a shaky breath. Her eyes fluttered once, twice, then closed. Her hand went limp. The monitors wailed. And as the surgical team rushed to intervene, Ethan stood frozen, Hunter trembling at his feet, both of them knowing deep in their bones that Molly's confession was only the beginning of a darkness far larger than this room. A thin curtain of mist clung to the early morning outside Denver General Hospital, the kind of gray veil that made the world feel suspended, as if holding its breath for whatever came next. And as Ethan Grayson stepped out into that muted dawn, he felt the cold seep into the old leather of his jacket and settle against his ribs like an unwelcome truth. Molly Grant was alive, but barely, and the surgeons were still fighting to stabilize what remained of her body after the chemical leak had nearly killed her. Ethan stood beside Hunter, the German shepherd, sitting rigidly at his heel chest, rising and falling in shallow bursts. Hunter's amber eyes stayed fixed on the hospital entrance, ears twitching with every echoing footstep inside, as if waiting for someone to call him back to battle. Ethan rubbed the dog's head gently, feeling the tremor of instinct beneath the fur. "I know, buddy," he murmured, voice low and cracked. "We're not done." And he wasn't wrong. The moment Molly whispered about a network using women as fake pregnancies, something in Ethan had snapped back into place. Not the man he had been before his downfall, but the man buried beneath all that grief, waiting for a reason to rise again. Inside the hospital's briefing room, Ethan stood with Agent Rebecca Ward from the FBI, a woman in her late 30s with stern hazel eyes, framed by sharp, intelligent brows. Her dark hair was tied into a no-nonsense bun, revealing a face hardened by years of chasing criminals across state lines. She carried herself with the precision of someone who had long ago learned to stand tall, even when the world tried to break her. Her navy suit was immaculate, her posture unyielding, and when she spoke, her voice carried the calm authority of someone who rarely missed a lie. Molly Grant wasn't the first, she said, tapping a file onto the table. We've been tracking similar cases for the last 8 months. Women traveling alone, sudden medical collapses, mid-flight mysterious abdominal devices. We could never find the source. Until now. Beside her stood Special Agent Lucas Hart, early 40s, rugged and muscular with a squared jaw and close-cropped dark hair peppered with early streaks of gray. His eyes were a piercing steel blue, the kind that read rooms before anyone spoke. His demeanor was steady, almost stoic, but Ethan sensed the flicker of compassion beneath the surface, a humanity carefully guarded after years in federal work. Hart extended a hand. We could use someone like you. We know your background, Grayson. We know what you walked away from. Ethan hesitated before shaking his hand, feeling old scars tug at his conscience. I walked away for a reason, he said quietly. Hart nodded. Then let's make sure no one else has to. The FBI presented a map dotted with red pins: Chicago O'Hare, Miami International, Seattle Tacoma, Portland International. Each pin represented a woman found unconscious, a false pregnancy recovered, or a suspected smuggler slipping past security. We believe the ring is run by a man named Victor Hale, Agent Ward added. She placed a photo on the table. Victor Hale appeared to be in his mid-40s, tall and lean, with jet-black hair tied loosely at the nape of his neck, his face sharp like carved obsidian. A thin scar cut across his right cheek, a pale streak that made him look permanently sinister. His eyes, cold and predatory, stared into the camera with the emptiness of a man who felt nothing for the lives he destroyed. He was a logistics expert, Ward said. Private transport networks, medical shipments, pharmaceutical routes. He went dark 3 years ago. Now we know why. Hunter sniffed the photo, then growled a low, instinctive rumble that sent a shiver through Ethan's spine. The dog had reacted with the same intensity he had shown toward Molly before her collapse. Ethan knew better than to ignore this. He recognizes something, Ethan said quietly. A scent, maybe, or a pattern. Hart raised an eyebrow. You really trust that? Ethan glanced down at Hunter, who held his gaze with unwavering conviction. With my life. What followed was a whirlwind across the country. In Chicago, Ethan and Hunter swept through terminals alongside local K-9 units. They met Officer Nadia Lopez, a short, athletic woman with curly dark hair and quick reflexes, who handled a Belgian Malinois named Fury. She moved with sharp efficiency, but her smile when it appeared was warm and disarming. Fury and Hunter sniffed through luggage belts, restrooms, and boarding areas. Hunter detected the scent again, a faint chemical trace, leading them to a woman trembling near a restroom, clutching her belly with the same haunted look Molly had worn. Another fake pregnancy. Another victim. Another tragedy narrowly averted. In Miami, the humidity clung to Ethan's skin like a second layer of guilt. Hunter paced restlessly across the hot pavement outside a terminal until his nose twitched and he bolted toward a shuttle bus. Inside, a young woman sobbed, surrounded by terrified passengers. She had fainted moments earlier. The same device was strapped to her abdomen. Another rescue. Another clue. In Seattle, rain fell in unbroken sheets as Hunter led Ethan to a man in a cargo vest who fled the moment he saw them. His name was Derek Colt, a lanky 30-year-old with nervous blue eyes and twitching fingers. Colt stank of fear and chemical residue, his entire body trembling when Ethan cornered him. Under interrogation, Colt spat out one name, Victor Hale, and then begged for protection. All roads pointed north. Finally, in Portland, under the damp gray sky of Oregon, Hunter stiffened the moment they stepped into Terminal C. Ethan felt the shift in his partner's energy like a wire pulled taut. Agent Ward and Hart flanked them as Hunter began to move, not running but gliding, nose low, muscles coiled. They weaved through crowds and coffee stands, past families and business travelers, until Hunter stopped dead in front of a man standing near a service door. Victor Hale. Tall, predatory, dressed in a charcoal coat with a black scarf. His skin was pale, almost bloodless, and his cold, dark eyes flicked downward to Hunter with a faint curl of disdain. Hale's expression didn't change, didn't flinch, didn't even register surprise. Instead, he offered a thin, poisonous smile, as though he had been waiting for them all along. Hunter bared his teeth. Ethan felt the fury vibrating through the leash. For the first time, Hale spoke, his voice smooth and emotionless. "Ah, the dog." Ethan's pulse hammered. Hunter's growl deepened, and before anyone could react, Hale slipped his hand into his coat. The Colorado afternoon settled into a warm gold that softened the edges of the world, the kind of light that could make even the most battle-worn soul feel briefly forgiven. And as Ethan Grayson stepped out of the Denver Federal Building, he felt the sun brush against his weathered leather jacket like a gentle reminder that winter, both the one outside and the one inside him, would not last forever. The wind carried the faint scent of pine drifting from the foothills, mixing with the distant hum of traffic, and the low murmur of reporters still gathered somewhere behind him, waiting for quotes about the dismantled smuggling ring and the arrest of Victor Hale. But Ethan didn't care about headlines. He didn't care about the sudden attention, the congratulations, the gratitude from officials he barely remembered meeting. He cared only about one thing: the steady rhythm of pause beside him, the presence of Hunter, his German shepherd, his partner, his anchor as the dog walked close, brushing against Ethan's leg as though affirming, "We made it." Inside the hospital, Molly Grant was recovering, weak but alive, her blonde hair tucked away beneath a soft hospital cap, her blue eyes flickering between exhaustion and relief, each time the doctor reminded her that the worst was over. Her 6-year-old son, Lucas, a small boy with sandy brown hair and wide, frightened eyes, had been brought in under protection. He sat by her bedside, clutching a stuffed dinosaur with one missing button eye. Lucas had looked at Ethan earlier that day, timid, yet hopeful, and thanked him in a quiet voice, trembling with innocence. Ethan hadn't known what to say. Words felt too small, too fragile for such gratitude. Instead, he simply nodded, awkward and unsure, hoping it was enough. The FBI had confirmed that every member of Hale's trafficking network still in the country had been tracked down and arrested. Agent Rebecca Ward had shaken Ethan's hand as she left, her hazel eyes, for once softened with genuine respect. "You changed the outcome, Grayson," she told him. "None of this would have happened without you." Special Agent Lucas Hart had echoed the sentiment, his usually stern face breaking into a rare, almost relieved smile. "You and that dog of yours? Damn fine work." But Ethan didn't feel like a hero. He felt released, as though the rusted chains he had worn around his soul for years had finally cracked open. He remembered standing outside the operating room 2 days earlier, believing Molly might die, believing history was about to repeat itself, that he would lose another person because of a decision he didn't make fast enough. But she lived. Hunter saved her. The world offered a different ending this time, one that didn't leave Ethan drowning in regret. Perhaps that was the shift he had needed all along. Hunter nudged his hand, now pulling Ethan back into the moment. The dog's warm breath puffed softly through his black and tan muzzle, and when Ethan looked down, Hunter's amber eyes met his steady, wise, unflinching. 5 years of companionship training, silence, and unspoken understanding lived in that one gaze. Ethan reached out, fingers brushing over Hunter's fur. "You did good," he murmured. "Better than good. You saved them. You saved her." Hunter's tail thumped once, a restrained wag that mirrored his disciplined nature, but his eyes shone with something deeper, bond recognition relief. The two walked together until Ethan found himself pausing at the concrete steps outside the building. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the parking lot, the sky painted in strokes of amber and soft rose. He sat down slowly, letting out a breath he felt like he had been holding for years. Hunter settled beside him, close enough that Ethan could rest his hand on the dog's broad head. For a long moment, neither moved. The world around them dimmed into a warm hush, like a campfire's glow, embracing tired travelers. Ethan rubbed Hunter's ear absently, letting his thoughts drift. He remembered the night his former partner died, a memory he had locked away so tightly it had fused with the marrow of his bones. The guilt of not acting fast enough, not trusting his instincts, not saving someone he cared about. It had buried him, shaping him into a man who survived rather than lived. But Hunter? Hunter had dragged him back from the edges of that darkness. Not just today, not just during the chase. Hunter had been pulling him back for years, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat, until Ethan could finally breathe again, without feeling weighed down by ghosts. The sunlight caught on Hunter's fur, turning it into streaks of gold. Ethan exhaled softly. "You pulled me out of the dark again, buddy," he whispered, his voice trembling with gratitude he had never said aloud until this moment. Hunter pressed his head into Ethan's knee, the simple movement carrying the tenderness of an oath renewed. Two broken souls somehow healing each other. Behind them, a plane roared into the sky, cutting across the horizon. Ethan watched it disappear into the clouds. He didn't know what came next, whether he would return to work full-time, stay on as a consultant, or walk away entirely. But for the first time in years, uncertainty didn't terrify him. It felt like possibility. It felt like dawn. Ethan rose slowly, Hunter rising with him. The sun dipped lower, spreading a warm halo around them. The man and the dog stood side by side, weathered, scarred, but standing, and began to walk forward down the steps together. And as their shadows stretched long into the fading light, they looked almost like two ancient warriors stepping into the horizon, bound not by duty alone, but by love, loyalty, and the quiet promise that whatever battles waited in the future, they would face them together. In the quiet moments of life, miracles often arrive in ways we least expect: a loyal dog, a second chance, a stranger who chooses compassion. And sometimes God works through these simple moments to remind us that hope is never too far away. If this story touched your heart, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe for more true reminders of courage and grace. May God bless you, protect your family, and guide your steps through every ordinary day, because even in the smallest moments, He is still writing miracles for each of us.